Well, and thank you all so much for joining and hopping on and taking some time out of your day. We really appreciate it. And we have a couple things that we want to bring up. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for a question and answer. But if you do have any questions, you can either type them into the chat. I know some of you are on your phone, so you might not have access to the chat. So typing, you can unmute yourself, and any comments, we'll read them out loud as well. So those of you on your phone will be able to know what we're chatting about. So hopefully everyone can see the slides. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. If everyone is able to mute themselves just for the beginning couple minutes while we're talking about some logistics and reminders, that would be great. And again, feel free to ask questions, raise your hand feature, or in the chat, unmute at any time. All right, so I think I'm turning this over to, oh, sorry. So the purpose of the, I guess, webinar discussion for today, we're just going to briefly go over the hearing and what to expect. We're going to have some tips for testimony. We're going to have a few people provide some examples. And then again, we'll leave plenty of time for any questions that people might have to help with that as well. So a few quick reminders. We did send out an email, but I know sometimes that ends up in people's junk and spam folders. So there is a link that just appeared on the Washington Department of Health website for testifying. So you can click on that Zoom link. It's a very quick registration form. And however, you have to sign up by by this Thursday at 5 p.m. if you want to testify on Friday. So they will close that portal at 5 p.m. Thursday. And then in the registration, they do have a couple drop-down selection buttons. So if you are testifying, click would like to testify and then also select support. And then once you sign up, you will receive an automated email with a link to the hearing with call-in information via phone and the link. Again, check your junk or spam just in case it ends up there as well. And if you haven't already, we'd love for you to also submit written comments to Department of Health by emailing sunrisedohwa.gov and then CCing advocacy@resolve.org before midnight on Friday, August 20th. So I'm going to turn it over to Abby Moore to talk a little bit about the overview of the hearing and anything of what to expect.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So first of all, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has been willing to take the time to not only prepare your testimony, but be willing to give it in a live format. I know it's not always easy, and it's certainly not easy making time in your day to do it, but this is really the type of things that really help us advocate on all of our behalves. So just a big thank you for your willingness to do this and taking the time to pop in and listen to this so that we can make sure we're as effective as possible. A few things, I will just reiterate what Tracy just said. Please be sure to sign in to testify no later than 5 p.m. tomorrow. I would do this on the earlier end. If you're able to just do it today, please do that. I think it always is helpful just to make sure that that one little piece is done. And then also make sure you're confirming that you do have that Zoom link that should be emailed to you almost immediately after. Double check that, because if you don't have that and you're trying to find it at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, no one is probably going to be available to send you a new link right away. So we don't want to have that missed opportunity for you to testify. That Zoom link, you should know, should be unique to you. So that means that when you sign up with your name and your email address, that Zoom link is specific to you as a testifier. So you can't sign up for someone else. You should just be signing up for yourself and for your own testimony. We don't know exactly what the layout of this meeting will look like. We do know that we won't have any control over who gets to testify at what point in time. So for those of you who are testifying, please plan on the full 2 hours. Hopefully after you testify, if you want to go ahead and sign off, you're more than welcome to do that. But because we don't know the order, it makes it hard to say whether or not you're going to be up for testimony at 8 o'clock on the dot, or 8:45, or, heaven forbid, 9:45 or 9:55. So we just don't know. So please make sure that you're available to be there for the full 2 hours if need be. And then also make sure that you're paying attention. This is always one of those things where you never want to be called up for that testimony and you're in the restroom or someone's not watching. Make sure that you're paying close attention for when your name is called. Hopefully, once the meeting starts, which it will promptly at 8 a.m., they will give us an outline of how they anticipate the meeting to go. One of the things that they're doing is trying to figure out how many people are signed in to testify. That way they can determine how much time they will give each person. And also that will help them determine whether or not they're going to build panels of support or against. So we have to be pretty flexible with our timing, and we're kind of at the mercy of the department and how they choose to conduct the meeting. I think one other thing that we should just anticipate is that my guess is that when you get your Zoom meeting link and you're in watching the meeting, you will be muted. You will not be able to make any comments until you're called upon, and then you'll be moved into what is called an active participant mode. Don't be too startled if all of a sudden you kind of gray out on your screen and then you pop up into a different screen. That's just moving you to a different section so that you can go into live participant mode. So if it seems a little hiccupy there, don't disconnect and then reconnect. Just bear with it, and it's going to put you into the meeting room so that you can actually give your testimony. For all of you who have already sent in your written testimony, that's great. I think if as you're limiting your testimony based on how much time we have per testifier, you can always mention that you've submitted written testimony as well, and the panelists can go back and take a look at your written testimony. It's always nice to do also because it gives you a little sense of relief in case there's something you forget to cover when you're actually giving your public verbal testimony. I'd also just suggest, because things have been a little bit, hate to say it, slightly disorganized with the organizational process, I think it's also a really great idea to go ahead and submit your written testimony, even if it's just your notes via email to that website that Tracy indicated, even if you've given your verbal testimony. It's just covering another base to ensure that we're getting everybody on the record and in the final report that will be produced by the Department of Health. So again, we don't know how much time exactly each person will be given. We do know that Betsy is going to start us out with a presentation, or I say presentation, but a brief testimony about Resolve and about what is happening nationwide, and hit some key points for us, and then we'll go in to that public testimony. So we don't know exactly how much time everyone will have, but I would anticipate it's probably going to be between anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes per person. 5 minutes is probably ambitious. So if you can think of ways to time yourself and cut your testimony down to about 2 minutes, that's going to be about the right place you're going to want to be. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions, or if there's any other pieces of clarifying details I can give. please don't hesitate to ask.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is it because I already submitted my written testimony, and is it, if it meets the time limit, is it okay that we just read our written testimony when we're presenting, or do we have to just kind of wing it?
So a lot of people you will see will get up and when they're on the screen, they'll just start to read their written testimony. I will say this, they can go back and read your written testimony at any point in time. The most effective way for you to communicate with them is for you to try and actually talk to the panel as though they're human, and tell your story or tell your experience. Of course, I think everybody who presents uses notes and refers back to their notes. That's absolutely fine. If your comfort level is just wanting to get there and read what you have, that's okay too. Just don't be afraid to, make that eye contact with the panelists when you're talking to them, and remember that there's humans on the other side of it, and they want to hear from you. They're there for a reason. So don't be afraid to, even if it means missing a few of your outlined points, to have that human to human contact there. I hope that answers your question. Either way, even if you read it, that's fine. Just don't be afraid of going, face to face a bit, if you will.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Betsy? Oh.
I was
there
I think there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, can you say more about who are the panelists?
So interestingly, we don't know who all 4 panelists are. I do know that Jane Beyer, who's a senior policy analyst for the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, is on the panel, as is I'm a reproductive specialist is also on the panel. We don't know who the other 2 panelists are. The Department of Health has not made that readily available. And the only reason we actually know that Jane Beyer is on and the other reproductive specialist is on the panel is we found out through other conversations that we've had directly with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner and other providers have had. So they've kept that information and really all information pretty under wraps. But that's what we know so far. So I see another question that says, if we register, does that guarantee us a spot to testify? It should. So the one thing that might happen is if we have so many people registering to testify, because there will be more people than just us, if they start to run out of time, there is a possibility that they could say, okay, we're only in this meeting for 2 hours, and if there's not enough time for everyone to testify, then please submit your comments in writing. That's why I think it's a good idea for everyone to submit their comments in writing, regardless of whether or not they're able to testify. But they will let you know as the meeting progresses if there's not going to be an opportunity for everyone who signed in to testify. Generally, they'll just try to shorten everyone else's testimony in order to make sure that everyone gets some time to get on the record. Okay, and then there's another question. Do we still need current, former veterans, cancer patients, and single parent folks to testify? I'll ask Tracy and Betsy that question. I think we've done a pretty good job of securing all of those people who we need to testify and getting them ready and prepared. I don't know if we're still working on a few more, but I'll turn that over to Tracy and Betsy on that question. I think we're squared away.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't want to limit written comments, so I would continue to reach out to people to submit the written comments. And, if they're comfortable going live, they're going to copy us on the testimony. If there's something that we think isn't covered, we can reach out and ask them to sign up live. But given the deadline's tomorrow at 5, that is a little tight, but please do encourage people to submit their written comments up through midnight on Friday.
Right.
We want to sort of overwhelm the panel with supportive comments.
And Betsy, I would add also is that in their update that they put today, they have also a deadline of 8 a.m. for written testimonies. So it's a little unclear.
Yeah.
So I would aim earlier then.
Yeah. So I've emailed the Department of Health about that and let them know that 2 things. Everyone who's writing in their comments is writing in essentially their own written testimony. So we're hoping that it's considered as such and expecting that it will be. And then also just letting them know that we've already let all of our advocates know that the deadline was previously published as midnight on August 20th. Therefore, we're hoping that they will make sure that all of them are accepted up until midnight of the 20th. It would be pretty hard for them to push back on that when they've just changed that date. I'm hoping it's a oversight.
Thank you. And I think the next question has to do with, at the end, can we do a high-level policy summary? So, yeah, we can do that at the end, absolutely. Okay, so I think I'm up next, right, Tracy? Tips.
Yes.
Tips on testimony. All right. So really, basically, as Abby said, your testimony is simply sharing your family building story, or in the case of professionals, the stories of your patients. If you are a current or former patient, you're not expected to be an expert on anything other than your story. Telling your story is the best way to educate the panelists about the impact of not having fertility insurance or not having adequate insurance, or if you did have good insurance, why it made a difference in building your family while others may not be so lucky. If you're a professional, you want to share the stories of your patients and the impact of cost on their access to care. If you trained or practiced in another state where there was an infertility insurance law, please share the difference it made in providing the most effective medical care for your patients. If you're a family member or friend of someone struggling to build their family, share what you have observed them going through and the impact that it's had on your entire family, perhaps. Everyone should, keep it simple, no acronyms or complex details of medical treatment. For patients, again, share how much you had to pay or might have to pay out of pocket to have a family, noting that such expenses are out of reach for many Washingtonians. Your story is very personal, but you want to aim to make it inclusive of the struggle that millions are going through, and almost over 200,000 in Washington state alone. And finally, emphasize family and use terms like infertility is a disease and family building, or fertility preservation allows cancer patients to have a family. Remember, you are advocating for pro-family legislation. Also, it's okay if you get choked up some. This is very personal to you, and we want to make sure that when the panelists review the legislation, that they remember all the stories they heard about the positive impact this legislation will have on families in Washington state. So now we want to hear some sample stories from some patients and a professional. I think we'll start with one of the patients, Alexis, and then move on to Dr. Herndon, and then get some other patients, just so we can get, sort of a patient and professional write-up from the top. I believe I saw Joyce Reinecke is on the call. So if someone doesn't have a cancer story to tell, Joyce can fill that role. But I'd like to start with Alexis.
Hello, everyone. I just saw Heather on there. Hi. So nice to see everyone on the call. I am tweaking my testimony that I have given before. So I'm just going to say it's a little rough. I haven't tried it out just yet in terms of timing, but hopefully it's cut down a little bit. And I'm going to read it. We'll ad-lib a little bit more next time. Here is my quick synopsis. Good morning. For the record, my name is Alexis Oliver Turla. Our journey to expand our family has not been easy. We have worked hard to make sure that generations of our family can afford the prosperity of the American dream. However, the financial burden of fertility is eroding our efforts and continuing the reality of the racial wealth gap for our family. To afford such a fertility journey, I had to work at Starbucks as a barista, even though I have a law degree. While I am thankful for the support of great companies like Starbucks, I had to sacrifice my career and earning potential for access to healthcare. My husband is a proud multiple tour veteran whose family sacrificed everything to move here from the Philippines. We live with the realities and the impacts of war, both seen and unseen. We're dedicated servants, but we lack structural support for our family journey. Our hope is to have a family without the financial burdens our parents sacrificed out of the legacies of Jim Crow or immigrating to this country to afford us a better life. And we are hoping that we can build our family without the further burdens of the racial inequities by leveraging our home or taking out more debt for healthcare. We hope that the Sunrise Review Committee will support veteran families struggling to make their American dream a reality. Thank you. And I have provided my testimony and submitted my testimony in writing for your further review.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I do have a question for Abby. Will they ask where people are from or ask people to announce where they live just to sort of provide some local color, I guess? Abby, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. They might. I think it's always a good, when you're introducing yourself, I always think it's great. Alexis just did a great job. Hi, my name is Abby Moore. I live in, Tacoma, Washington. That's always very helpful. It just is a little bit more of a personal detail that helps kind of give them a little idea of who you are and where you're from. Also, if you're a professional, please let them know where you work, what you do, what your title is. That way we can't expect them to know just from your sign-in.
Great. Well, that's a great segue then to Dr. Chris Herndon.
Thank you, Betsy and Alexis. That was wonderful. I wrote my written testimony today, and over the next day and a half, I'm going to keep going over it and kind of shortening it and making it and practicing it. But I'll be look forward to your feedback on it. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a reproductive endocrinology and infertility physician in medical practice for over a decade, the past 4 years of which serving Washington as a state-employed physician at the University of Washington. As a physician who trained in both insurance-mandated and non-mandated states, I can attest to the difference that an insurance mandate can make for a patient struggling with the devastating impact of infertility. It is, in a word, transformative. It can mean the difference between despair and hope, between shattered dreams and the life-altering experiencing and joys of parenting, between a state that affirms the right of all to family building and a state of glaring inequities. The presence or absence of a mandate determines to a large extent who can become a parent. The lack of insurance coverage and the resulting out-of-pocket costs for infertility treatments make it difficult, if not impossible, for far too many in our states to access this medically necessary care. Imagine for a moment if Washingtonians had to pay out of pocket for arthroscopic knee surgery, which costs roughly the same as an IVF cycle because insurers were not required to cover it. What would that look like? Of those struggling to walk in that system due to untreated disease, what would likely be their income level or their color of their skin? Knee surgery and IVF may seem a misaligned comparison, but the World Health Organization has ranked infertility as the 5th leading generator of disability among the population under 60 worldwide. Studies on the psychosocial impact of infertility have placed it on par with the diagnosis of cancer. A mandate for insurance coverage is a critically needed intervention within our current healthcare realities to ensure even a basic level of access. In its absence, the right to build a family in the face of infertility becomes a function of economic prowess, with access to medical care reserved only for those who can afford it, predominantly those who are older, wealthier, white, or work for the right employer. This mandate is, at its heart, a call for equity in Washington state. The real-world impact of the absence of an insurance mandate for infertility is heartbreaking. It is sobering to consider how many thousands in our state have struggled with infertility but were unable to receive effective standard of care treatments, or who prematurely discontinued their treatments because their savings ran out, or those who irreversibly lost their fertility because they could not scramble together the means to afford standard of care fertility preservation in the short time window between a new cancer diagnosis and starting chemotherapy. For these patients, it was not the limits of medical science that was shortcoming. It was because infertility and its impact was weighed as undeserving of financial assistance through the absence of a mandate. This reality needs to change and is changing. Over the past 3 years, 4 states, Delaware, New Hampshire, New York, and Colorado, have each passed comprehensive legislation mandating coverage for infertility. Studies show better health outcomes for women and children in mandated states due to safer medical practices and patient choices. Inclusive legislation supports the right of LGBTQ and other persons who may need medical assistance for building families. There is robust data and long-term precedence with other states that comprehensive coverage only nominally increases premiums and administrative costs. Of note, Colorado, the most recent state to mandate insurance coverage and fertility, passed their bill in the COVID-19 pandemic. In signing the bill for a state, Governor Paulus cited the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic as adding to the many reasons why infertility should be covered by insurance. In closing, I ask that this proposed bill be considered for what it is, a mandate that is essential to mitigate the profound health disparities and lack of equity that has long existed in Washington state. Although no one can change or correct the past, this legislative mandate will be transformative in the lives of those in the Evergreen State who struggle with infertility or face the prospect of infertility for years to come. Thank you for your consideration and support of our patients.
Thank you. I think Alexis and Dr. Herndon are tough acts to follow, but we do want to hear, obviously every story is unique, and yet they're going to be common themes. And so it's important that, you know, that we hear as many stories as possible and as time allows. So I believe Annie Kuo is on the call. And she's had a lot of experience with doing federal advocacy. So we'll have her share her story now in her home state.
All right. Yes. And I've been waiting. I'm so excited that we're doing this, y'all. And so true about tough acts to follow. So I have a structure, and I am wide open to feedback. If anyone wants to ping me on email later, I can work on this, and I'll practice it through Friday. So my name is Annie Kuo, and I am from Shoreline, Washington. About 10 years ago, I got a primary infertility diagnosis and have experienced both pregnancy loss and a lack of success with fertility treatment because of biological limits. After my only child was born, apart from treatment, multiple attempts to preserve my fertility were not fruitful due to those biological limits. In my case, a family history of early menopause. Thanks, Mom. Since then, I have explored other ways to build a family, but have been stalled due to financial roadblocks. So to navigate around those, I've held on to COBRA premiums for a Massachusetts-based employer in the past because Massachusetts covered fertility treatment. And I held on to those for as long as possible and then borrowed over $10,000 against my retirement fund. And I actually still consider myself one of the lucky ones. For nearly 5 years, I hosted monthly support groups in Seattle for Resolve, the National Infertility Association. And I've gotten to know hundreds of fertility patients whose biological heartbreak and disappointment extend to their pocketbooks due to lack of state mandated coverage in Washington state. To afford treatment or adoption, many of them take out second mortgages, bank loans, and borrow from friends and family, sometimes spending the amount of a college fund before a child is even born. Infertility doesn't typically have a quick fix. IVF, for example, should be viewed as a course of treatment with no guarantees of success. And oftentimes it must be repeated, accumulating a financial burden for patients. Adoption is also expensive and there are no guarantees. Infertility is an equal opportunity disease that affects people across color lines and across various financial means, but it's also a social justice issue in which many people of color are affected and yet cannot afford the treatments that I'll find a more polite way of saying this than the white people do, that the white people can afford. Ideally, our government would fully support the 1 in 8 Americans and Washingtonians suffering infertility by increasing access to care and offering financial relief for pro-family pursuits for the Washingtonians who so dearly want to reach their family dreams. Thank you very much.
Right, I think we're batting 1,000 here. We know our community is extraordinary and it's on full display here. Thank you, Annie. And Amanda Hathaway has also offered to share her story. Are you on, Amanda?
I am. Let me step in the other room. My husband's on the call right across from me, and I don't want him in the background.
Okay.
He's talking with his employees, so.
Okay.
As much as I'm sure you guys would love to hear him in the background. So I'm kind of being on mine too. I didn't want to read my letter verbatim, so I kind of was taking notes during this. I'm going to be cleaning this up as well. But they're often hello, members of the Sunrise Review Committee. My name is Amanda Hathaway. I am a state employee here in Olympia, Washington. My journey to become a parent started back in 2015. My husband and I tried naturally, and we were ecstatic to find that we did get pregnant on our first try, but it ended in an early miscarriage. We tried again for almost a year, but did not get pregnant again, and that's when we started seeking help from a fertility specialist. And that was about October of 2016. In January of 2017, we found out that I was pregnant naturally and was really excited about that. And when we went to go see my specialist again for an early ultrasound at 6 weeks, we had learned that the pregnancy was ectopic. So it was in my tube, not where it was supposed to be. And so we were sent to St. Pete's in Olympia for confirmation and then figure out a plan to remove. We had tried methotrexate, a couple rounds of that, which is a shot to terminate, but that did not work. And I was stuck having emergency surgery at 3 a.m. one morning. And while in surgery, we had learned that my other tube was blocked. So our only option to build our family would be through IVF. We had said IVF in July of 2017. We had gone through the stimulation cycle to work my ovaries, only for it to be canceled the day before our trigger shot. So that was about $5,000 out of pocket that we had spent on medications. We had tried a couple months later in September, and we were excited to make it to egg retrieval that time, but unfortunately we had only retrieved one immature egg, and so we weren't able to fertilize, and that was about another $10,000 out of pocket. Our third attempt ended in poor response from me. My follicles were not growing as they should, so that was about another $5,000 out of pocket. Later that year, that was December of 2017. Sorry with all the dates here, guys. Our fertility specialist had recommended us to go get a second opinion just to make sure that we were so comfortable proceeding and whatnot. And so we did, and they had gave the same recommendations that our current fertility specialist was doing. So we decided to stay local with him. And in March of 2018, defeated, hopeless, depressed, I promised my husband that we'd give it one more try. We had added a couple of other medications to that cycle, and much to our surprise, that cycle was successful. We finally got some eggs that we were able to fertilize and transfer. And so that round gave us my 2.5-year-old son, Daxton. That round was about $20,000 out of pocket. When Dax was 9 months old, we decided that we wanted to try to give him a sibling. We still had one frozen embryo, but we wanted to see if we can get just a couple more embryos because we weren't expecting our second transfer to be successful. So we mimicked the protocol from the previous cycle and added a couple more medications just to really help encourage my follicle growth. And we were lucky enough to have success again. And we did it. And now that little guy is a year old. But again, another $25,000 for that cycle due to the extra medications out of pocket. So I have been working with this group here that's presenting the bill for over a year. And I truly feel that family building coverage should be accessible for all. And for a state that is so focused on equity, I think it's important that we add this. And thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Again, just, what this community goes through and then finding resolution, but staying in the trenches to help others is truly extraordinary. I actually see Tyler on the phone and on my screen. I know I read your very impactful comments that you submitted. I don't know if you want to provide sort of the cancer professional perspective for us.
Sure. I'll sort of read what I have, but I plan to just sort of speak more off the cuff in person. Hi, my name is Tyler Kettrell and I live in Seattle, Washington. I am a pediatric, adolescent, and young adult oncologist at Seattle Children's Hospital and a member of the faculty at the University of Washington. My pertinent professional background is that I am triple board certified in pediatrics, internal medicine, and I'm pediatric hematology oncology. I serve as the medical director of the Adolescent and Young Adult Oncology Program at Seattle Children's Hospital. I'm a member of the Oncofertility Consortium, the international collaboration that works to promote fertility preservation for cancer patients. And finally, I serve in many leadership roles for national cancer consortiums and networks, including the Children's Oncology Group, which establishes national and international guidelines for adult and pediatric oncology for improving the outcomes and lives of children, adolescents, and young adults with cancer. Within minutes of meeting a child, adolescent, or young adult with cancer, you learn that cancer-induced fertility, infertility, and fertility preservation are critical topics to patients and their families. With each year within Washington, about 4,200 children and young adults under 40 are diagnosed with cancer, representing roughly 10% of all cancer cases. Today, the cure rates for cancer in that age range are about 85%, which is amazing. This high cure rate, however, comes at an enormous cost. Cancer treatments can cause long-term harm. For this reason, the oncology community has shifted dramatically to focus on survivorship, saving lives without medically induced long-term side effects that diminish the quality of life. We do this either by discovering less toxic therapies or by reducing the side effects in our current armamentarium. This is particularly important for patients diagnosed so young, for they have decades of life to live after their cancer treatment ends. The value of this shift is self-evident. A simple example is the advancement of medications to control a patient's nausea. Because we now have scientifically backed tools to prevent the common side effects of chemotherapy, anti-nausea medications are standards of care that are not only expected, but demanded by payers and hospital standards. It is time to add infertility and infertility treatment and fertility preservation to that list of treatable side effects, and it is time for our payers and programs to support it. For context, nearly 25% of cancer treatment regimens carry high risks of infertility, and another 25% have moderate risk. For patients who experience the side effect, the grief of losing the option of parenthood after cancer is devastating. For some, it may even keep them from life-saving therapy. There are standard, effective options to preserve our patients' ability to have biological children. Without insurance coverage, sperm cryopreservation can cost upfront to around $200 to $300, and for women who are freezing their eggs, it can cost as much as $15,000. All that needs to be raised within days of starting treatment. Many times these decisions need to be made quickly, as fertility preservation needs to be completed all before the start of treatment. Multiple studies have shown that children and young adults are not educated about options to preserve their fertility. There's little excuse for this, as the American Society for Clinical Oncology and NCCN, or the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, have recommended education in fertility preservations for the last decades. Personally, I feel strongly that one of the contributing factors for the lack of conversation in the oncology field is a concern for offering a service that is not covered by insurance. First of all, it implies that the service is optional or experimental. Second, of course, is the discomfort in offering something that may not be important. May be important to the patient, but they cannot afford. Perhaps the physician feels it is kinder left unmentioned. What are the costs of not offering? From my experience, some patients make suboptimal treatment decisions, stopping medications early or choosing treatments that are less toxic to minimize the impact of their fertility. Then there are the psychological costs. Studies have shown that survivors of infertility have lingering distress, depression, and anxiety. Conversely, some evidence suggests that having the opportunity to consider fertility preservation and make an informed decision can improve well-being. Actually storing reproductive materials helps patients feel more optimistic about their future. In summary, the current message being sent when we do not cover fertility preservation is that we do not value cancer survivorship and that we do not value children. I have regularly met with patients preparing to undergo bone marrow transplant or intensive chemotherapy tell me that preserving their own or their child's fertility is one of the most important aspects of their care they have discussed, and it provides them with hope. Children are our future, and I ask that you allow all Washingtonians the right to parenthood, even after medically necessary cancer treatment.
Again, so powerful. And I think we all appreciate that when you marry the patient voice and the professional voice, our voice becomes all that louder and stronger. So thank you for that, Tyler. And I thought I saw Joyce join at the beginning, and I just want to see, she's with the Alliance for Fertility Preservation, with whom Resolve partners a lot on this type of legislation. And Joyce also is a former cancer patient. I just want to see if you have anything to add from the patient perspective, if you're on, Joyce.
Hi, yeah, of course. No problem. And I'll work on not reading also, but I might just fly through it right now, if you don't mind. So I will, it's hard, as everyone has said, to follow all of this tremendous, testimony that's already been given, but I think this is what they need to hear. So I would just start my testimony by thanking the committee member for allowing me to speak today. And I'm director of the Alliance for Fertility Preservation. Hello?
You are breaking up, but I think you might be back. Let's see.
Sorry, I'm out in.
You know what? If you want, turn your camera off, and that often improves the Wi-Fi, and we can at least hear you. Let's see if that works.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, guys.
No, that's okay.
Let me jump back over.
Okay.
Okay. I'm here before you as the Executive Director of the Alliance for Fertility Preservation, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to helping cancer patients understand and navigate the reproductive consequences of their treatment. But I am also coming to this hearing as a cancer survivor. In my 20s, while living in Seattle, I was diagnosed with a rare cancer called leiomyosarcoma. This diagnosis was sudden and terrifying, and it came just as I was starting my professional life as an attorney in Seattle. I suffered two blows. First, that the cancer threatened my life, and second, that my life-saving treatments would probably destroy my ability to one day become a mom. But I was very fortunate, and I got great medical care. My oncology team told me about the threats to my fertility and recommended that I preserve embryos. Because this wasn't covered by insurance, my husband and I had to raid our savings and come up with, at the time, nearly $10,000 to cover the costs. Today, I am more than 20 years out from my cancer diagnosis, and I have healthy twin daughters in college, daughters that I have because of fertility preservation. This experience dramatically affected my personal life and redirected my professional life. For the past 15 years, I have worked to raise awareness about the reproductive side effects of cancer treatment for young adults. Chemotherapy, radiation, and certain surgeries can all cause infertility. Through my work, I'm in constant contact with young cancer patients, survivors, and also family members. I hear about not only their fears about cancer, but also their distress over infertility. When I first started working in this space many years ago, all I could do was listen. The options for patients were so limited, especially for women. So there was really no discussion about insurance coverage at all. But as you have heard, the technology for protecting sperm and eggs has advanced tremendously over the past decade or so and is now considered standard of care by all of the leading cancer and reproductive societies. The remaining barrier to parenthood for these patients now is insurance coverage that denies fertility preservation and post-treatment family building options. Insurers have viewed infertility for a long time as elective, and in failing to cover these procedures, they forced many patients to be sterilized as the cost of their life-saving cancer treatments. This cost is unnecessary and cruel. As you have heard today, over the past few years, other states and regulatory agencies across the country have recognized infertility as a disease and have acknowledged that these procedures are medically necessary for many patients and therefore worthy of coverage. For this reason, I respectfully ask that you address this unjust coverage gap and support the proposed coverage. This will give Washington's young cancer survivors the ability to protect their fertility and their future parenthood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Joyce. And that came in loud and clear, just so you know. So thank you, as always. We did have a question if anyone is going to talk from an LGBTQ perspective. And I believe Dr. Amy's joined the call, and I know that that was part of your testimony or written comments that I saw. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if you would like to share, but we also, I think, have individuals as well. But Dr. Amy's?
I can read. Friday, I'm going on a hike for my birthday in Glacier. So I apologize because I was planning on testifying in person when it was 2 weeks ago. But I did submit my written comments, and I don't know if you want me to go ahead and read what I sent in, but I'd be happy to. I can read those right now if you'd like.
I think it would be helpful to see because your perspective, I think, is different. And then we'll swing it back to Abby for just any feedback she wants to provide all of us. So please do, Dr. Amy's.
Hi, I am a professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Washington School of Medicine in the Division of Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology. My clinical practice is at Seattle Children's Hospital, and this bill would be life-changing for my patients. First, I care for many pediatric and adolescent patients who are diagnosed with cancer or other medical conditions where chemotherapy and radiation are required for them to survive. We have many fertility preservation options available, including ovarian cryopreservation, which is freezing an ovary for later use, oocyte cryopreservation, which is freezing eggs for later use, and sperm. At the time that they are starting their treatment, however, often one parent has to stop working to be with their child through the treatment. The treatments are time intensive and expensive. Cancer can be financially devastating for a family. Very few of our patients have insurance coverage for their fertility preservation options. Most families simply cannot afford the fertility therapies and therefore lose the window of opportunity to allow their child, who will likely survive their cancer, to be able to have biological children in the future. Second, I care for many patients with spontaneous infertility. Many of the diagnoses that are associated with natural infertility may fall under an umbrella of a difference of sex development. Some of these conditions can be known as intersex conditions. Many of my patients are born without functioning ovaries or testes, which is called gonadal dysgenesis. These patients may have a uterus but not functional ovaries, but may be able to carry a pregnancy if they were able to have in vitro fertilization with a donor egg. Some of my patients are born without a uterus but have ovaries. They could have a biological child with in vitro fertilization with a gestational carrier. Some of my patients have medical diagnoses where they have some ovarian function with an extremely high risk that they will have menopause before they are through their teens or 20s. These patients and their families usually do not have the financial resources to freeze their eggs or ovaries before menopause occurs. They cannot preserve their ovaries or eggs, not because they don't want to, but because they simply cannot afford it. Finally, I care for many patients who are transgender, where gender-affirming care can adversely impact their fertility. They often decide not to preserve their fertility, not due to lack of desire for future children, but because they cannot afford to freeze their sperm or eggs. Many of my patients who are in same-sex relationships would like to have biological children, but most insurance carriers do not cover donor sperm and intrauterine insemination. Washingtonians face the following reality. If they are lucky enough to be employed by one of the very few large companies whose insurance covers fertility therapy, or they are otherwise wealthy enough to afford out-of-pocket infertility care, they are likely to have a biological child. For those without these resources, they must accept their infertility, even though there are medical therapies available. This disproportionately impacts those of color, those who identify as LGBTQI, and those with disabilities. The lack of a law requiring insurance to cover basic infertility evaluation and therapy results in discriminatory medical care in our state. I'm asking the Department of Health and the House Healthcare and Wellness Committee to move forward with Sunrise Bill H 1640.1. I have been waiting through my career for Washington State to address infertility care for its residents. I cannot express how much hope this has given my patients and how much it would positively impact Washington families.
Wow. Again, thank you so much for that awesome testimony. I'm sorry you can't deliver it in person, but we know that having it in writing will be impactful as well. So, and obviously, thank you to all the professionals for the important work you do and helping patients build families in the state. Abby, I just want to see if, generally speaking, you have any more pointers for us as we fine tune our testimony.
I think you all have done a wonderful job. I mean, the authenticity and the heartfelt nature of the stories really comes through. And it's times like this, being a lobbyist in such a cynical world where politics is very polarizing. This is some of the best stuff that you get to deal with every once in a while. It's really nice on my end. So thank you for that. I think you've all done a wonderful job. For those of you who are testifying live, just don't forget to introduce yourself, to say your name and who you are. Also, you may get questions from panelists. That's entirely possible. It'll probably be right after you conclude your testimony. If you don't know the answer to a question, don't be afraid to say that. Just say, I can try to circle back and get you some information, or simply, I don't know. And then we can circle back and get those panelists the information that they need. But I think you're all doing just a really wonderful job. I'm excited for Friday morning to come. It's long awaited, and I think it's going to go very well. So thank you all for being willing to do this.
Thanks. And
Thank
I
you.
think I'll bounce it back to Tracy to close us out with some last minute reminders.
So I think we don't have anything else. If you have any other questions between now and Friday, please feel free to email advocacy@resolve.org, or you can also email me personally at tsullivan@resolve.org, and we'll be happy to get back with you if there's anything that's wasn't answered during this call, or something that happens to come up, or if you're watching the recording. So it is almost time. So if there aren't any other questions, I think we will end the call.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All right. Well, thank you so much all
Friday.
for joining.
See you on Friday.
See you Friday. Don't forget to sign up, register tonight, right now.